I was a skeptic. I'm not anymore. What happened in the Atchafalaya Basin back in September of 2014 cured me of that real fast. And it all started because my drunk uncle insisted we go frog gigging on a night when we should have stayed home. I was 28 then, working maintenance at the chemical plant off Highway 30 in Baton Rouge. I'd always been the kind of guy who relied on logic. Mechanical problems made sense, tools made sense, broken things could be fixed. Monsters? No. That was for movies and people who grew up hearing too many Cajun ghost stories. I heard them too, sure, especially from my grandma, but I never bought into any of it. The Rougarou, the swamp devil, the wolf man, none of it felt real. But that night felt too normal at first. Too ordinary. That's what still gets me. My Uncle Ray called me around noon, slurring only a little, which meant he'd only had a couple of beers. He said he needed help checking jug lines down near Bayou Pigeon, off LA 75. It was a 45-minute drive and I didn't have work the next morning, so I said sure. Ray's been frog gigging and fishing those waters since before I was born. He knew every bend, every patch of reeds, every hidden stump that could rip a lower unit clean off a motor. When Ray asked for help, it usually meant he wanted company, not actual assistance. What I didn't realize was that he'd been drinking pretty hard that day. When I pulled up to McGee's Landing at sunset, he was leaning against his beat-up aluminum boat, a cooler full of beer sitting right beside him like a loyal dog. He grinned wide when he saw me. "Boy, you took your sweet time," he called out. His words were only slightly fuzzy. "Hope you brought bug spray. They're out for blood tonight." That should have been the first clue something was off. Mosquitoes are always bad in the basin, but Ray saying they were out for blood like that? I remember it now, but at the time it was just Uncle Ray being dramatic. The air was thick and wet, even for Louisiana. I stepped out of my truck and immediately felt sweat bead on my neck. The sun was already dipping low, turning the water a kind of deep copper color. Mist curled off the surface like thin ghost fingers. The smell of mud, decaying plants, and stagnant water rolled over everything, normal swamp smells. I helped Ray load the last of his gear into the boat. We had 2 frog gigs, a tackle box older than me, a dim flashlight Ray insisted was still good, and his old .22 rifle that he brought everywhere, usually for snakes. We shoved off just as the sky turned purple. The water slapped gently against the hull as we motored down the channel, Spanish moss hanging low like curtains brushing the top of our heads. You haven't experienced darkness until you've been in a Louisiana swamp after sunset. Thick, heavy, almost oily. The kind that feels like it seeps into your skin. I pulled out my phone to check signal, 1 bar flickering. Typical. Ray cracked another beer and steered us toward a cluster of cypress trees. "You hear that?" he asked suddenly. I paused, listening. Frogs, cicadas, the distant croak of a bull gator. Normal sounds. "Hear what?" "Exactly," he said with a laugh. "Whole world talking. Always a good sign." He was in a real good mood, humming some old Waylon Jennings tune, tapping his foot against the metal hull. I was mostly quiet, soaking in the evening air, taking mental notes for the next day's shift. I liked these quiet nights. Even with Ray drunk, it felt calm, predictable. That's what throws me now. Knowing how calm it was before everything unraveled. We tied off at a muddy bank so Ray could check a jug line. He hopped out, boots sinking almost to the ankle, and cursed as he tried to haul the line in. I stayed in the boat, shining the flashlight for him. Something tugged hard on the line, making Ray stumble. "Big turtle maybe," he muttered. Whatever was on it got away, the line going slack all at once. "Well, that's damn typical," Ray grumbled, wiping sweat and mud off his forehead. I remember rolling my eyes. That was normal for Ray, one small setback and he got irritated. I didn't think twice about it. We pushed off again. The motor hummed steady, and the cool night breeze finally started cutting through the heat. I leaned back, letting my hand drag in the water. It felt warm, almost bathwater warm. "Gonna be a good night," Ray said after a minute. "Got a feelin'. He always had a feelin'. We kept gliding deeper into the basin, the moon flickering through the branches. An owl hooted somewhere behind us. A fish splashed out of sight. Ray cracked another beer. The hiss of the can breaking open echoed a little too loud in the stillness. Around 9:10 p.m., when we reached a narrow cut between 2 clusters of cypress trees, I felt something brush against my nerves. Not fear. Not yet. Just awareness. Like someone had touched the back of my neck. But I ignored it. Chalked it up to the humidity, or the way the shadows warped in the corners of my vision. Ray didn't notice anything. He was drinking, fiddling with the outboard motor, humming off-key. He leaned over the side to look for gators, laughing like this was the greatest night of his life. Me? I was just thinking about how I'd have to be up early to help with a valve replacement at the plant. Normal. Absolutely normal. It's strange how you never recognize the last truly normal moment while you're living it. You only see it later, looking back, wishing you'd paid attention. Wishing you'd seen the warning signs for what they were. That moment, right there in the boat, drifting under those cypress limbs, Ray drunk and singing, the swamp breathing slow around us, that was the last time I felt safe. I didn't know it yet, but something was already watching us. I'm not proud to admit this, but the moment things really started going wrong, I didn't notice the danger first. My body did. My instincts picked it up before my brain did, like some old buried part of me remembered something my logical mind had forgotten. It hit me so subtle and so strange that I didn't even realize anything was wrong until it was already happening. It started with the quiet. 1 second, the frogs were croaking so loud it felt like they were right inside the boat with us. Cicadas were buzzing, water splashing softly against the cypress roots, owls calling in the distance. Normal swamp noise, constant, alive, thick. Then, just as we were drifting past a narrow bend choked with tall grass and leaning cypress trunks, everything stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Cut off so suddenly it felt like the world had been put on mute. I lifted my head because something felt wrong on a level I couldn't put words to. My ears felt like they were stretching, straining for sounds that weren't there. Even the water seemed quieter. It was like the entire swamp tightened its lungs. Ray didn't notice. He was halfway through another beer, humming that same Wayland tune, tapping his foot in rhythm on the aluminum hull. "Ray," I said quietly. "Hold up." He looked over, irritated. "What now? You don't hear that?" He paused, listening. His brow furrowed in a way I rarely saw unless something really had his attention. "Where the hell'd everything go?" he muttered. He cut the motor so we could listen better. The second the engine died, the silence pressed in on us like a heavy blanket. Not even mosquitoes buzzed near our ears. In Louisiana, that's never a good sign. Bugs don't take breaks. A weird shiver moved up my spine. Swamp's too quiet. Ray shrugged it off at first. Cold front moving in. Air pressure change. Animals do this sometimes. But his voice didn't sound confident. Not fully. I wanted to agree with him. I wanted to say, yeah, that makes sense. But it didn't. I'd been out there plenty of nights. I'd hunted. I'd camped. I knew the rhythms. When the swamp went quiet before, it never felt like this. The boat drifted slowly, rubbing against reeds with a soft whisper. The hairs on my arms stood up. Then a smell hit us. It rolled across the water like a warm breath. Musky. Thick. Wrong. Like wet dog mixed with rot, heavy enough to sit on your tongue. I gagged a little, covering my mouth. "Damn," Ray said, waving a hand. "You smell that? Something died out here." "That's not just dead animal smell," I said quietly. "It's different. Probably a big hog carcass," he said, but he didn't sound sure. I tried to rationalize it too. Maybe a gator dragged something under. Maybe the water was just turning over and stirring up muck. The logical explanations lined up easy enough, but something wasn't fitting. Smells are part of the swamp. You get used to them. But this one felt like it had purpose. Like it was drifting toward us, not just lingering. A splash echoed to our left, heavy like something stepping into the shallows deliberately. Not a fish. Not a turtle. Something with weight behind it. Ray swung his flashlight toward the bank, but the beam flickered, weak and yellow, barely lighting up 10 feet. The shadows seemed to swallow the light whole. "You need new batteries," I muttered. "It was fine last week," he snapped defensively, smacking the flashlight. That's when I saw it. Movement. Something slipped between the knees of a cypress tree. Big, dark, low. I only caught it for a second, a shadow crossing a thicker shadow, but it was there. Too large to be a raccoon. Too smooth and deliberate to be a hog. Something with shape and intention behind it. My pulse kicked up hard. "There's something moving over there." Ray steadied himself and leaned, squinting. "Probably a bear. They've been moving further down here lately. Bears didn't come that deep into the swamp. Not often. Not like that." Another splash. Behind us this time. Closer. Ray straightened. "Okay, that's weird." He wasn't humming anymore. He wasn't drinking anymore either. He hadn't taken a sip since the silence hit. "Turn the motor back on," I said. "Just in case." Before he could respond, the dogs at a distant camp started barking, wild, panicked barking that carried across the water. Then, as suddenly as they started, they cut off. Like someone flipped a switch. I felt my stomach drop. Something brushed the side of the boat, not a fish bump, not a log. It was a long, slow drag that vibrated through the metal, like claws or nails trailing along it. The sound was soft, but it sent a spike of cold fear straight through me. "What was that?" I whispered. Ray's jaw twitched. "Probably just a gar." "That wasn't a fish," I said. "Gar don't scrape like that." He opened his mouth to argue but then froze. His eyes locked on something behind me. "Don't make any sudden moves," he murmured. My skin turned to ice. Slowly, very slowly, I turned my head and looked toward the treeline about 20 yards away. Two eyes reflected back at us. But they weren't low to the ground like a deer's. They weren't spaced right either. They were too high, too far apart. And they weren't the dull yellow of raccoons or the red flash of gators. They were a pale greenish-white, glowing faintly in the beam of our sputtering flashlight. But they weren't blinking. They were staring, unmoving, watching us with stillness that felt predatory. My throat tightened. My blood ran cold. What is that?" I breathed. Ray swallowed hard. "Big ol' dog maybe. Dogs don't stand that tall. Dogs don't stare like that." "I don't like this," I whispered. Ray, drunk and stubborn, raised the flashlight a little higher. The beam flickered, then steadied, hitting the shape just enough to outline something. Something upright. Something broad-shouldered. Something that stepped backward into the shadows with silent, deliberate movement that made my stomach clench. It didn't run. It just disappeared deeper into the trees like it wanted us to see it first. I felt the sensation of being watched intensify, heavy and suffocating, like invisible fingers wrapping around my ribs. "Ray," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We need to go." But Ray shook his head and slurred, No, we're checking the last line." He stood up, wobbling slightly, and stepped onto the muddy bank despite everything inside me screaming not to follow. And against my better judgment, against every instinct that told me this was a very bad idea, I climbed out after him. Ray's boots squelched in the mud as he lurched forward, and I followed him up the bank because being alone in the boat felt even worse than being with him in the dark. The moment my feet hit the ground, the smell hit me again, stronger this time. It wrapped around us like steam off a carcass left too long in the heat. What? Wrong. Ray pretended not to notice, but I saw the way his shoulders tensed. "Let's just grab the line and head back," I whispered. He waved me off. "Ain't nothing out here but hogs." But even he didn't sound convinced. The mud sucked at our boots as we moved toward the treeline. The little flashlight sputtered in Ray's hand, its beam jittering over roots and fallen branches. I held onto the boat rope behind me, keeping the hull close just in case we needed to scramble back fast. Something moved in the brush to our right. A soft crunch. Just one step. Heavy enough to make the ground seem to thud faintly beneath my feet. Ray froze. I felt the rope tighten in my hand. "Did you hear that?" I breathed. "Probably a deer. But deer don't move like that, slow, deliberate, like they're testing the air before taking another step." We pushed forward anyway. Or rather, Ray pushed and I stayed right behind him because the darkness behind me felt even worse. The jug line was tied around a cypress root. Ray leaned down to pull it in, muttering under his breath. As he did, I scanned the tree line. My skin crawled. Then I saw them. Tracks. Not fresh, but fresh enough that water hadn't filled them in. I crouched and shined my phone's flashlight on them. Even with the weak light, I could see the outline clearly. Dog-like. But wrong. Too long. Too narrow. Claws deeper than any canine I'd ever seen, sunk into the mud like whatever made them was carrying a lot of weight. "Ray," I whispered sharply. "Look at this." He turned, annoyed. "It's a dog track. No dog makes prints this big." My voice shook. "And look at the stride. It's long." Ray crouched down beside me. The smell hit again, drifting from deeper in the trees, making my stomach clench. He didn't say anything. Behind us, another sound. A branch snapping. Not far. Not loud. But purposeful. Ray stood up fast, swaying slightly. "We're going back to the boat." "Yeah," I said, barely breathing. "Now." We started backing toward the water, keeping our eyes on the trees. We moved slow at first, careful not to trip. I felt sweat roll down my back, sticking my shirt to my skin. Halfway there, something moved behind us. Not close, yet, but close enough that the sound was unmistakable. Step. Then another. Slow. Heavy. Pacing us. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. The rope trembled in my hands as I pulled the boat closer. "Ray." "Quiet," he whispered, and it was the first time I'd ever heard fear in his voice. We reached the boat, but something was wrong. My eyes adjusted just enough to see the aluminum hull. Deep grooves. Scratches. 4 long claw marks carved down the side, fresh enough that bits of metal curled outward like torn foil. The boat was dented near the back like something heavy had leaned against it, or tried to climb in. "Oh hell no," I said without meaning to. Ray swallowed. Art. Behind us, something exhaled. Not a growl. Not a snarl. Just a slow, steady breath that carried weight and intelligence. We spun around at the same time. The flashlight flickered, dying for a second before sputtering back to life. It barely reached the tree line, but just enough to see movement. Not a full shape, just a suggestion of something big slipping behind a trunk. "Get in the boat," Ray hissed. We climbed in, mud and water sloshing as we scrambled for footing. Ray yanked the motor cord. The engine coughed. He pulled again. And again. Nothing but wet choking sounds. "It's flooded," Ray grunted. "No, something messed with it," I said, my voice thin with panic. "Ray, something messed with the damn motor." He swore and grabbed the pull cord again. That's when the growl rose out of the trees. Low at first, like thunder under the ground. Then deeper, vibrating through the water, through the hull of the boat, through my bones. My blood ran cold. Ray dropped the cord. Jesus. Something stepped out from behind a tree. Not fully into the open, just one leg. But the size of it. My breath caught. Covered in dark fur, muscles shifting beneath the skin, a leg shaped like a dog's rear limb but bigger than anything I'd ever seen, easily as thick as my waist. It disappeared again into the shadows as if it wanted us to see just enough. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold onto the side of the boat. "Ray, what is that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, grabbing a paddle. "Help me push off." We shoved against the bank, trying to get the boat drifting. The water was shallow, thick with reeds, making it difficult. Every push felt like moving through syrup. Behind us, the creature moved along the tree line, circling us. I could hear it now, pacing. Step, stop, step, stop. The rhythmic pause was worse than constant movement. It was thinking, measuring, studying us. "That's not a hog," I whispered. "No," Ray said quietly. "It ain't." The rustling stopped. The silence pressed down again. Ray froze mid-push. Then a splash, close, too close, right behind the boat. I didn't look at first. I didn't want to. But my body turned anyway, slow, unwilling. Something huge slipped through the reeds, shadow shifting with deadly grace. Not charging. Just following. Waiting. "What do we do?" I whispered. Ray swallowed. "We get to that old duck blind. Now." He pointed to a small shape across the bank, a weathered wooden blind, half collapsed but still standing. We paddled hard, the water slapping loud against the hull. Too loud. It hurt us. The pacing turned into heavier steps. Fast. Controlled. Closing the distance. Reeds parted behind us with soft hissing sounds. Ray's breathing grew ragged. "Hurry. Hurry." I dug my paddle into the water so hard my muscles screamed. We hit the mud bank near the blind and jumped out, dragging the boat halfway up the shore. Ray stumbled, falling to his knees but scrambled up fast. The creature stopped moving. The silence was absolute. Then, one step. Closer. Just one. Enough to say it knew exactly where we were. Enough to say it wasn't done. And as we rushed toward the blind, my chest tight, my legs shaking so badly I could barely run, one awful thought repeated over and over. This thing wasn't hunting us by accident. It was stalking us on purpose. Ray shoved me through the warped doorway of the duck blind first, as if getting me inside would somehow keep both of us safe. The wood creaked under our weight, brittle with rot, and for a second I was sure the whole structure would just collapse and hand us right over to whatever was outside. But it held, barely. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with mildew. My lungs burned from breathing too fast, too shallow. Ray slammed the half-broken door behind us, though it didn't latch. It just swung inward and rested against the frame, like a flimsy lie pretending to be protection. We stood there, not speaking, not even really breathing. Just listening. Outside, the night crawled with tiny sounds, the whisper of water shifting, the skitter of insects in the reeds, the distant croak of a frog. Normal things. Almost comforting. But the big sound, the one we feared, wasn't there. No steps. No breathing. Nothing. And that was worse. Ray wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He was sweating hard despite the cold. It didn't follow, he whispered, but his voice cracked on the last word. You didn't believe it? Neither did I. The thing was out there, somewhere close, choosing quiet on purpose. Listening to us the way we listened to it. My heart thudded like it was trying to punch out of my chest. I pressed a hand against the rough wooden wall to steady myself, flakes of old paint sticking to my palm. Ray edged toward a broken slat in the blind, peeking through. I grabbed his sleeve without thinking. Don't, I hissed. It's waiting. For what? He whispered. For us to slip up, I said. I didn't know how I knew. Maybe the way it moved, the way it didn't rush us, the way it studied us like prey. Something about it felt deliberate. Ray stared at me for a long moment, then let the slat fall closed. The darkness inside the blind was thicker than outside, but somehow it felt safer not being able to see the tree line. Safer than watching something huge move between the trunks, waiting for the right moment. This place won't hold, I muttered. If it wants in. It ain't coming in here, Ray said fast, too fast. Animals don't mess with structures like this. That was no animal. He flinched like he wanted to argue but couldn't. Minutes passed, or maybe it was seconds. I lost track. Time stretched, thin and fragile. Finally, Ray exhaled. We gotta think. I am thinking, I said. And all I'm thinking is we need to get out of here. That's what it wants. That's what you want, because sitting here scares you. Hell yeah, it scares me, he snapped. Something tore up my boat. Something bigger than any damn hog. I almost smiled, at least fear made him honest. The wind shifted, carrying the smell again. That same thick, rotting sweetness. It drifted in through the gaps in the boards, curling around us like fingers. Ray gagged. God, what is that? I didn't answer. My stomach clenched too hard to let words out. The smell faded a second later, but the silence that replaced it was even heavier. Something was near. Close. Right outside. I tightened my grip on the boat paddle I dragged with me. It was a cheap aluminum thing barely good for pushing us through the shallow marsh. But in that moment, it felt like the only thing between life and whatever waited in the trees. Ray held his pocket knife. A tiny folding blade. Practically useless. But I didn't say anything. Fear made people hold on to ridiculous things, and I wasn't taking that comfort away from him. Then, a soft scrape along the outside wall. Slow. Deliberate. Ray stiffened, eyes widening. Another scrape, higher this time. Like claws tracing the wood. Not hard enough to gouge. Just exploring. My skin crawled. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The creature moved to the left, toward the doorway. Its weight pressed the boards inward, wood popping softly under the strain. It was big. Bigger than I'd allowed myself to imagine. A shadow passed over the cracks. Massive, shifting. Something brushed against the door and the hinges groaned. Ray mouthed, "Don't breathe." The footsteps circled the blind. Slow, methodical. It was mapping us, tracing the structure, testing weak spots. It stopped at the back wall. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then a single heavy thud against the side, hard enough to shake dust loose from the rafters. Ray jerked backward, tripping over an overturned bucket. The noise clattered through the blind like a gunshot. We both froze. Then the creature let out a low, rumbling growl right against the wall. So close I could feel the vibration in my teeth. Ray scrambled up, panic taking over. "We can't stay in here," he whispered harshly. "We gotta run." "If we run it'll chase," I whispered back. "That's what predators do. It already is chasing us." Another growl, closer. No, not closer. Higher. Like it was above us. I looked up slowly. A shadow shifted across the slatted roof, blocking what little moonlight filtered through. Boards bowed inward under enormous weight. "Oh God," I breathed. It climbed up. Ray's face drained of color. "We have to go. Now." He lunged for the door. I grabbed his arm, but he yanked free. "Ray." Too late. He pushed the flimsy door open and bolted into the night. "Ray!" I stumbled after him, stopping only at the threshold. The moonlight flashed across the water, across the reeds, across Ray sprinting in blind terror. And then, a massive shape dropped from the roof behind him. A blur of fur and muscle and impossible speed. Ray reached the boat, about to grab the edge, when the creature slammed into him from the side. Art. He flew through the air, hitting the mud with a sickening thud. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Ray tried to crawl, but the thing stood over him now, a towering shadow blocking the moon, its breath steaming in the cold night. It wasn't killing him. It was studying him. Playing with him. And then its head lifted and turned toward me. Our eyes met. Not animal eyes. Not fully. Something aware lived in them. Something old. Something hungry. Ray whimpered beneath it. I backed into the blind, my legs shaking so violently I almost fell. The creature stepped off Ray and took one slow, deliberate step toward me. Then another. It wasn't finished. Not with him. Not with me. Not even close. Ray didn't scream, not at first. I wished he had. A scream would have made sense. A scream would have been human. But he only let out a choked, broken sound as he tried to drag himself backward through the mud, his hands slipping uselessly. The creature didn't pounce again. It stalked, slow and steady, like it wanted every second to stretch out and fray our nerves until we snapped. I ducked back inside the duck blind, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the paddle. My breath came too fast, too sharp. I felt the whole structure tremble as I pressed myself against the wall. Ray's voice finally tore through the night. "Help. Please?" His words were shredded with fear. The kind of fear you can't fake. I knew I should run. Knew I should stay silent. Knew going out there meant dying. But the sound of Ray crying for help did something to me. It tore at something I didn't want to admit I had. Loyalty. Guilt. Whatever it was, it shoved me toward the doorway despite every instinct screaming, "Don't do this." The creature leaned over Ray, sniffing him. Its head, God, its head, was massive, wolf-like in shape but stretched, longer snout, thicker jaw, eyes that glowed faintly with some unnatural shine. Its breath steamed in the cold air, each exhale sounding like the rumble of a storm inside its chest. Ray tried to kick at it, but the creature swatted his leg aside without even looking like it tried. Mud splashed. Ray's boot landed 10 feet away in the reeds. "Get away from him," I whispered. My paddle trembled in my hands. The creature lifted its head. It heard me. Ray's eyes met mine, wide, pleading. "Don't leave me," he sobbed. "Please don't leave me." The creature turned fully now, hulking form dripping mud and water, shoulders rolling like an animal that knew its own power. It started walking toward me, not charging, not rushing. Just walking as if it knew I wouldn't run. And maybe it was right. I backed further into the blind. The floorboards groaned beneath me. The creature stepped up onto the bank, its claws clicking against the wooden slats outside. The sound made my teeth ache. Ray grabbed its back leg, desperate, stupid. "Come back, help." The creature didn't even spare him a glance. It just kicked, a single sharp motion, and Ray went silent. I didn't know if he was unconscious. I didn't know if he was dead. I didn't ask. The creature reached the door of the blind and stopped. Its size eclipsed the opening. It would have had to lower itself to enter. And for a long, terrifying second, it simply stood there, its head inches from the warped doorframe, nostrils flaring as it sniffed. I held the paddle raised like a weapon. Pathetic. But it lifted its muzzle and stared at me with those eyes that weren't fully animal. Eyes filled with awareness, recognition. Everything in me turned to ice. "Why?" I whispered. "Why follow us?" Its lips curled, baring teeth longer than my fingers. It wasn't an answer. Not really. But something about the look told me this wasn't the first time it had done this. And it wouldn't be the last. Then, another sound cut through the night. A crack of a branch to the east. The creature's head snapped toward it. Muscles tensed. Ears pricked forward. Something else was out there. Something it didn't like. It stepped away from the blind, posture shifting, not shrinking, not afraid, but alert. That tiny distraction was all I needed. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I bolted out the back of the blind where one wall had rotted away and collapsed. My boots hit the mud and slid, my knees nearly giving out, but I forced myself upright. The reeds whipped my face as I tore through them, heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me the creature let out a snarl, angry, furious. I realized I'd moved. I realized it had been tricked. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just ran, tearing through the marsh toward the thinnest line of trees where the land rose slightly above the waterline. Branches slapped my arms. Mud swallowed my feet. I stumbled, scraped my palms, shoved myself back up. The creature crashed through the reeds behind me now, no longer patient or slow. It moved like a nightmare-given form, like something too strong and too fast to be real. I hit drier ground and sprinted toward the trees. If I could reach thicker cover, maybe, I'd slow it down enough to hide. I didn't believe that, but fear pushes hope into places it doesn't belong. A heavy thump landed behind me. I felt the ground shake. It was close. Too close. I dove behind a fallen log just as the creature lunged. Its claws slammed into the mud where I'd been standing half a second before, gouging deep trenches. A snarl ripped out of its chest. I scrambled along the length of the log, keeping it between us. The creature vaulted over it like it weighed nothing, landing so hard the impact rattled my bones. I bolted again. The trees worked in my favor for a moment, thicker trunks, tangled brush. The creature tried to follow, but it was too big to maneuver easily. It snapped branches and tore through saplings, furious now, enraged I'd slipped past it. But its anger bought me seconds. Only seconds. I burst into a small clearing, a dry patch of ground littered with dead leaves. My lungs burned. My legs felt like water. I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. I scanned the clearing desperately. A fallen hunting stand. Tilted on its side but still partially intact. The ladder was broken. The metal frame twisted. But the undercarriage, the storage compartment, sat half sunk in the dirt, forming a small pocket of space beneath it. Barely enough for a person to crawl into. Barely. I hesitated only for a breath. Then I dropped to my knees and clawed at the dirt, pushing myself into the narrow gap. The rusted metal scraped my back. Leaves stuck to my face. The earth smelled damp and metallic. I twisted onto my stomach, pulling myself in deeper until my boots vanished under the frame. I couldn't go any farther. I couldn't breathe without making noise. I pressed my mouth against my sleeve and went utterly still. The creature burst into the clearing, breath sawing, body steaming in the cold. It stalked forward, sniffing the air. Its growl vibrated the ground beneath me. It walked past the hunting stand, then stopped. Slowly it turned back. I squeezed my eyes shut. The creature lowered its head, sniffing the dirt inches from my hiding place. Its claws scraped the metal frame above me. One tug and I'd be exposed. One shift of its massive weight and the metal would collapse. I pressed myself into the earth, praying, not to survive but to go quick. The creature growled, a low questioning rumble. It knew I was close. It knew it missed something. Its snout pressed against the gap, hot breath washing over my cheek through the leaves. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. After a long, agonizing moment, it lifted its head. Something else caught its attention. Another scent. Another sound. Something deeper in the trees. It stepped away. Then it walked into the forest, slow at first, then faster, then gone. I stayed under the frame long after the sounds faded. Minutes. Maybe an hour. Because the creature hadn't given up. It had only let me go. For now. I didn't crawl out right away. In fact, for a long time I wasn't even sure I could. My muscles had locked up, refusing to move after nearly an hour cramped beneath the warped metal frame of that fallen stand. My right leg had gone completely numb. My cheek was pressed against damp earth that smelled of rot and old leaves. Every time a twig snapped somewhere in the woods, every time the wind shifted the branches overhead, my heart spasmed like the creature had come back to finish what it started. But eventually the silence became too much, too heavy, too complete. I realized if I stayed there until sunrise, I might never get the nerve to move at all. So I pushed myself out. Slow, inch by inch. My clothes snagged on rusted metal. Mud sucked at my knees. When my head finally cleared the edge of the stand, I froze again, scanning the clearing through a haze of panic. The woods were still. Nothing moved. No growling, no heavy footsteps, no low rumbling breath that vibrated in your chest. But I didn't trust it. When I finally stood, my legs trembled so hard I had to lean against a tree to keep from falling. The cold air stung my skin. I realized my hands were bloody, scratched from scrambling through brush and shoving myself into that hiding hole. I don't remember getting those scrapes. Fear does that. It edits things out. I forced myself to breathe normally. I was alive. But Ray was somewhere back near the blind. Or maybe worse. I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. And yet the thought of going back the same way I'd come, the dark path through the reeds where that thing had chased me, I couldn't do it. I physically couldn't put my feet in that direction. My whole body rebelled. So I chose the only option left: take the long way around the marsh, circle back toward the truck, and pray to God that Ray had managed to crawl away or hide. It felt cowardly, but I knew the truth. If I went looking for him right then in the dark, the creature would find me instead. I moved as quietly as I could through the trees, following the faint rise of ground that skirted the edge of the marsh. The sky had lightened slightly, maybe 4 or 5 a.m., though I didn't dare check my cracked phone yet. The reeds whispered in the wind. An owl hooted somewhere far off. Every sound made me flinch. About halfway toward the truck, I came across the first sign that the creature wasn't done with us. A dead hog. Or what was left of one. It lay half submerged in a shallow patch of mud, torn open in ways I didn't recognize from any predator I'd ever seen. I'd hunted my entire life. I knew what gator kills looked like, bear kills, even big cat kills. But this, the hide was peeled back, not shredded. The ribs were cracked open with precision, like something had pried them apart rather than snapped them. And the tracks around it? My blood ran cold. Massive, almost the length of my forearm. Digitigrade canine-like. But the spacing was wrong. These weren't wolf tracks. Wolves didn't stand 8 or 9 feet tall. Wolves didn't walk on 2 legs. I crouched low, bringing my hand close to one print without touching it. My fingers shook. The claw marks gouged so deep into the mud they cast long shadows. It was following the perimeter. Circling. Hunting. I backed away slowly, making sure not to disturb anything. The last thing I wanted was to leave a trail it could use. The woods thickened ahead and I slipped into them, grateful for the extra cover. Pine needles muffled my footsteps. The air was colder here and a faint mist clung to the trunks. I walked faster now, almost jogging, desperate to put distance between myself and that kill site. Finally, I saw the faint glint of metal through the trees. Race truck. The silver Chevrolet sat crooked beside a muddy turnoff near the old levee road, trees crowding close around it. Relief hit me first, a wave that made my knees weak. Then fear. The driver's side door was wide open. Ray. I whispered even though I knew he wasn't there. I approached slowly, scanning the woods behind me, then the bed of the truck, then the tall grass on either side. No movement. No sound. No footprints except ours. But the truck told its own story. Deep gouges raked across the driver's door, 4 long parallel claw marks that cut straight through the metal like it was cardboard. The window was shattered inward. Blood smeared the inside of the doorframe and a muddy boot print, Ray's, marked the running board. He'd made it this far. And the creature had followed. For a moment I just stood there, gripping the doorframe, my breath coming in short bursts. He tried to get away. He really tried. I climbed into the driver's seat, hands trembling as I moved glass shards aside. The keys were still in the ignition. Ray must have dropped them or been pulled out before he could start it. I sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do. The right thing was obvious. Find Ray. But the right thing and the smart thing weren't the same. And I knew one hard truth: I couldn't help him if the creature caught me next. I turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. The familiar sound made something inside me unclench. I threw the truck into reverse, tires spinning in the mud before catching. The second I backed onto the levee road, movement flickered in the tree-line. I saw it. Standing at the edge of the woods, half-shadowed, half-lit by the truck's headlights. The creature. Its chest rose and fell like it had been running. Mud dripped from its fur. Its eyes locked onto mine through the windshield, bright, intelligent, furious. The muscles in its shoulders tensed. Its lips curled back in a silent snarl. For one long, horrible moment, neither of us moved. Then it stepped forward. I floored it. Gravel sprayed behind the truck. The engine screamed. The creature lunged, crossing the distance toward the road with terrifying speed, but I had a head start. The truck fishtailed, then straightened as I shot down the levee road toward Highway 308. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see it chasing me on all fours. But it stayed at the tree line. Watching. Almost like it knew a vehicle would be too much trouble. Or maybe it was satisfied with what it had already done. I didn't slow until I hit pavement, bouncing onto the highway so hard the suspension groaned. When I reached a gas station with bright lights and cameras, I finally stopped. I stumbled out, collapsing to my knees on the concrete, shaking uncontrollably. A clerk rushed out, asking what happened, if I needed help, if someone attacked us. I couldn't give him an answer that made sense. Search teams found Ray later that day, 3 miles from where I'd last seen him. Alive, but barely. Dehydrated. Delirious. Scratched to hell. He kept saying the dogman over and over, terrified it would come back. They said it was shock. Trauma. A wild animal attack. He never said what exactly he saw. And neither did I. But we both knew. The claw marks on the truck were photographed by the sheriff's office, but quietly brushed off as bear damage, even though bears don't leave clean 4-fingered gouges spaced like that. Tracks were discovered too, huge ones, but they filled with water before plaster casts could be made. Convenient, right? Ray moved out of state 2 months later. Stopped drinking. Stopped hunting. Stopped talking to most of the family. I tried to go back to normal, but I haven't been able to set foot in a swamp since. Even at night in my own house, I catch myself listening, really listening, for heavy footsteps or slow breathing outside my windows. People who don't believe me laugh when I try to tell them. Or they think I'm crazy. Or lying. But Ray believes me. And I believe him. Because whatever stalked us that night wasn't a wolf. Wasn't a bear. Wasn't any normal predator. It was curious. It was intelligent. It was hunting. And if you ever find yourself near Bayou de Alamans at night, if the woods go quiet, if you smell wet dog and copper in the air, if you feel the hair stand up on the back of your neck, live. Right then. Right there. Don't question it. Don't look back. Because once that thing decides your prey, it doesn't forget.